So are we ready to go? All right, good enough. Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me here today. We're going to talk to you a little bit about what we do in our ministry that we have over in Port Orchard here. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how adoption fits into the plan that God has for us so that we can see how that fits into the Christmas story. Start out with James 1, verse 27. It says, "Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to help orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unstained by the world." We chose that verse a long time ago when we started our ministry, which is the One Less Orphan Adoption Ministry for people who are adopting children. Most of you already know that. The church has graciously given us time tonight to talk to you about it, to let you know what we're doing, to keep you abreast of what's happening right here in Port Orchard, and to give you some idea of some of the ministry opportunities that are right here in your back door and sometimes your front door. So most of you know we have this business downtown or down Mile Hill Road here. It's called the One Less Orphan Benefits Store, and we have been running that store for a few years. And we've decided a long time ago that when we first started it, we decided we wanted it to be a ministry more than just a venue for people to come and shop. So we've been working hard to make it that, and as we've gone into our ministry opportunities there, we've started to realize it's a lot more than we ever thought it was. But you might ask, how can a store be a ministry? How can you have a ministry at a store where it's just a retail thrift store, which is essentially what it is? Well, before we start to answer that question, I want to ask you guys some questions. And this is questions rhetorical. I don't need answers. I want you just to think about these in your own mind, okay? In the place where you live, have you ever met someone who claims to be or is homeless? Just think about that, okay? Have you ever met someone in the place where you live who is without anything except what they carry around with them? Have you ever met someone who struggles with drugs, alcohol, or other addictive substances? Have you ever met someone who's got mental instabilities that may not be a result of something that happened from like mental drugs or that kind of stuff? Maybe they had an accident. Have you ever met anyone like these? Do you know of anyone who's ever expressed to you their hopelessness, the fact that they don't know why this is happening to them? Well, this is what the ministry of One Less Orphan hears every day. We hear people in these situations all the time. They come into the store. Sometimes they don't come in. Sometimes they're out on the sidewalk out in front of the store. And I'll get into a couple of stories about that a little bit later. Over the last 5 years, it's become very apparent that the store is not just a store. We have a lot of things going on there. We've got a lot of store stuff going on there, and we spend a lot of time working through all the issues of the store, which are myriad. There's tons of them going on. But there's also people, and the people are why we're really there. Originally, Bethany and I talked about what we thought the ministry would be, what would be the ministry opportunities for what's going on there, and we came up with a mission statement for the store. And the mission statement for the store, of course, as you would expect, deals with adoption, because that's what we were focused on at the time, and essentially we still are. But the mission statement had 3 points to it. The first one was we wanted to be able to provide financial assistance for people who are adopting children. Adoption is expensive. We wanted to be able to help out if we could. The second part of that was to give potential situations, to give money to potential situations to reduce the amount of child abandonment in the world. And we worked through a couple of different organizations that we've gotten to be not affiliated with, that's not the right word, but we've worked with them to be able to help in situations where, like, for example, a child who needs a significant surgery in a third world country, and the only way the parents can pay for that is to basically give the child up, because if they try to pay for it themselves, they can't. And the only way they can do it is to give the child to an orphanage where the orphanage can take care of the costs of that surgery. So they have to give up the child. So if these organizations that can be able to fund that surgery for that family, the child can stay with the family. That's an example of reducing the child abandonment. That's one way to do it. There's other examples too. But that was the second point for our mission. And the third point for our mission was to provide financial care for financial assistance for orphan organizations, which are working around the world with orphans who may never be adopted for whatever reason. And there are a lot of reasons why that can happen too. So that was our mission statement. And we talked about the possibility of other things happening, running some programs out of the store for other people who are needy and that kind of stuff. We decided at the time, this is 6 years ago, we decided that's probably not what we want to do right now. That's not what God is leading us into. How many of you know the verse in Proverbs 16:9? Anyone know what Proverbs 16:9 says? You will when you hear it. Proverbs 16:9 says, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." So what we found is that God said, after our heart planned our way and said, we're going to do this adoption ministry, God said, yeah, but you're going on beyond that. So that's what it's moved on beyond that. So in the past couple of years, we found that God's plans stretch us beyond what we can do in and of ourselves so that he can prove that he can do it. And that's what he's done through our store. And if I went through all of the details of some of the stuff, it would take a long time to do. I won't do it tonight because we're going to be finished by 7 if I can. But you would hear all the stories that have happened and all the things that have happened to the Tilzey family and to the store and all of those things that God has stretched us out to where there's no way we could do this. There's no way this is happening. And then it happens. And it's somehow God makes it happen through whatever means he chooses. But God has chosen to do that. And our ministry has become a community ministry because of that. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. We've developed relationships with homeless people. We have homeless people come in regularly. Aging out foster kids. I don't know if you know the foster system, but the foster system, when they get to a certain age, they're no longer in the foster system. They age out, and a lot of those kids, a lot of those people are just out on the streets because they don't know where to go after they're out of the foster system. With adults struggling with relationship issues between married adults or maybe not married adults in some cases. Aging parents whose kids are not following Jesus, and conversely, grown-up adult kids whose adult parents may not be following Jesus. Bible college graduates. We've had Bible college graduates come in. They want to have advice or discussions about Bible college level of topics. They want to find out, what does that really mean? We've had parents who've come in who've just seen their child pass away unexpectedly. We've had the opposite of that. Children come in who've seen their parents pass away unexpectedly. Sometimes expectedly, sometimes not. We've seen individuals fighting with substance abuse, addiction. We've seen widows, and yeah, we have also worked with the adoption community, people who are adopting children. So that is still what we are focused on. We've also partnered with the Coffee Oasis. We are part of their internship program for 13 to 25-year-old youth to work in local businesses around the area, and we've had several interns go through their program in our store. And in every case, our main goal is to share the gospel with the people that we're working with. And I'll get into that in a couple of minutes into how we do that. But we've had the joy of seeing a couple of those people come, at least a couple of them, maybe 3 that I know of for sure, who've come to know the Lord, or at least claim to have come to know the Lord, while either at our store or under discussion with someone from our store. And it's been a really, really joy to see that. And some of you have met some of those people who've been here to our church a few times to visit us as well. When we developed our store and we developed our ministry, we decided that the whole purpose of the store had to be focused around Jesus Christ. So we defined this pyramid of purpose. So we built a pyramid, and you know how a pyramid looks like. And it's all the blocks in the pyramid. And if you ever look at a pyramid, there's only one block at the very top, that last triangle block right at the top. You know, that last thing up there, that's the last one. That's the most important one on the pyramid. And with that block right there is the one that says, did this person have a chance to choose Jesus as their Savior? Every other block underneath it is the underpinning that gets them up to that point where we can get there. And that's the block we want to reach with each of the people that we're dealing with. Whether it's families adopting children, which we are hoping to only help out children who are families who are going to be pointing children in the direction of Jesus Christ. That's our goal. Or whether it's someone who comes in and wants to talk. It's about what is the chance of that person choosing Jesus, and have they ever had that opportunity? It was really good to hear Colin with his blessing today, because that's the kind of thing that happens in our store. I was really appreciative of that. Thank you, Colin. I don't have Dum Dum to give you, by the way. So anyway, but the store part of this is not our primary focus, and that's what I want to get across to everybody. Our primary focus is the ministry issues that we go through and all the things that we see, the people that are there. We are there for the people, and sometimes it's very taxing, and we go home sometimes completely wrung out at night, and all we want to do is get home, and sometimes we don't get home till 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and we'll be at home, and all we want to do is just sit. And then the whole family just goes and sits. And sometimes we just go sit inside the living room and we'll do nothing but, watch a concert on TV or something, or some TV show or something, just because nobody really feels like doing anything because we feel kind of strung out and kind of tired. But through all this, God has led us to keep the store. And we started it right before COVID. So there's been a lot of financial issues and a lot of logistical issues because of COVID that came up to basically put a lot of stresses on us and at the store, put on the store as well, on the business as well. And God has seen us through all of that, and a lot of that's been help from you guys here at the church, as well as a bunch of other people who've helped us out. But we've had difficulties going through all the things that have happened. We've had a lot of difficulties that have happened to us, and I want to talk a little bit about that, because that's the reason that we've chosen to choose the avenue of missionary candidacy. So right now, Bethany and I have chosen to be missionary candidates with In Faith Mission. And I'll just tell you a real quick synopsis of In Faith Mission. First off, Larry and Vonnie Pratt. Larry's here tonight. They are part of In Faith Mission, and they have been for several years. And they casually mentioned to us, when they saw us in the midst of our financial troubles that we were having 4 or 5 years ago during COVID, that maybe we should consider home missions, that might be something that we'd be focused on, and we could use that avenue to help us with the financial parts of our and the prayer parts also, but the financial parts was what we were focused on at the time. And I suspect, because I don't know for sure, but I suspect that Larry and Vonnie may have mentioned that to some people at leadership at In Faith, because In Faith approached us about a year later and asked us if we were interested in that our ministry that we had defined seemed to fit into the kind of thing that they would like to see in their programs. So we discussed it with Bethany and I. We discussed it with In Faith, and then we discussed it together, and we prayed about it for quite some time before we finally decided in late 2023 to apply for candidacy with In Faith Mission. Now, In Faith Mission is what used to be known as the American Missionary Fellowship, and if you've ever heard of that, before that they had a different name, so they became the American Missionary Fellowship. That was the 1970s, I think they chose that name, but they were also the American Sunday School Union back in the 1800s, correct? That's right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, they were the American Sunday School Union way back when. So that's the organization that we chose to affiliate with, and we are with them now as missionary candidates. So why did we choose them? Probably because they chose us. Straightforward, to be honest about it. Actions that we've already taken as missionary candidates are that we have attended a mission conference with the In Faith Mission. We've also been to several different missions conferences at different churches around the area where we've presented our ministry. And we have been to church mission boards. I sat in on a mission board just about 2 weeks ago over in Seattle, church over there that we know of, and that invited us to come over and talk to them. So we were over there in Seattle, and we talked to that mission board as well. We've also talked to many individuals about our ministry and what we're doing in it. And we wanted to come to our church because it's our church, and we wanted you guys to know what's going on, and we wanted you guys to have the opportunity to be a part of, in any way that you choose to be, and be a part of our ministry and to help us out, especially with the prayer support, because we do feel like we need that very significantly. Right now, financially, we're gaining support, but we're at a very low level. It's been a tough road this last year trying to raise financial support. We do have quite a few prayer partners, and I invite you also, if you'd like to be one of those, we have a list. You brought the sheet, Bethany? Oh, we don't have a sheet. I was going to say we have a sheet you could give us emails on. We forgot that, sorry. But you can get your email that if you'd like to be on our missions letter list. We do send a missionary letter out every month. And if you'd like to be on that, please let us know, and we will get that out to you as soon as we can, and we'll get you on the monthly list. But it's been tough for, In Faith told us that it's been tough for many of their candidates to find much traction in the financial support arena this last year or so. We don't know if that's something that's dealing with all over around the world, or if it's something where people are just holding on to their purse strings. We don't know, but that's something they told us. But we want you to know what we're doing, and we're not in the position of, I'm not trying to beg for money, so don't look at me that way, please. I'm not very good at this. So I'm trying to tell you, we need support. The support that we need is everything we can possibly get, and I'll give you some examples of the support we need in a few minutes. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about some of the ministry opportunities that we have and tell you a few stories. Those stories that we've got, some of these are really fresh. I'll start out with the ones that are a little bit older. There's a young man who came into our store and came in carrying a sleeping bag and clearly didn't have a lot going for him as far as money-wise. And he disappeared back into the clothing area. Those of you that have been to our store, you recognize that our store has two sections. We have a large section for the main stuff, and then there's a hallway and there's a clothing area. You can't really see into the clothing area from the front counter. So if I'm there alone, which happens probably 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 3 days, you won't see what's going on back there unless you walk back there. So this young man came in and he walked back to the clothing area, and he looked like he needed a coat. It was kind of cold outside, so I thought nothing of it. Disappeared. I'm merrily going about my way at the front counter. I realized about half an hour later, I haven't seen him. I don't know where he is. So I walk back. When I have a little bit of free time, I walk back and I look around in the clothing area, and I realize underneath one of the long clothing racks with women's skirts on it, hanging down to about that far from the floor, and so you can't see behind him, is a pair of boots that belong to somebody, and he's sound asleep on the floor underneath the skirts, behind the skirts, back behind them. He's gone sound asleep back there. Well, I woke him up and I made him leave the store, but I was nice about it, but I made him leave the store, and then in the process I gave him a coat and I gave him a couple big comforter so he'd stay warm, and it was a sunny day outside, although it was chilly. And about 4 hours later, we left the store and we were driving down the street and saw him at the nearest bus stop, wrapped up in the comforter that we had given him, sound asleep. Found out later that he is very addicted to substances of some sort. He has some major problems with that. He didn't tell me anything about it. He doesn't like to talk. He has been back into the store a few times. He is an interesting character we have to deal with. Another ministry opportunity that's going on right now. There's a young lady that's been out on the grass, outside the store, outside the kidney center at the end of the store. She sleeps on the grass out there at night a lot of times. She's been sleeping on the pavement underneath cover when it's raining. She has a sleeping bag and an umbrella, and she gets under there and she sleeps there so she can stay warm or so she can stay dry. She has major medical issues. She has major mental issues, so much so that we try to talk to her, and she doesn't understand anything much that we say. Even if we say, can we help you? She sits on the sidewalk and talks to people, or talks to somebody, or talks to nobody. She just does, and she talks very loudly and with a lot of language that wouldn't be repeatable anywhere that I would go. We have another young man that's a little bit better story than that. He's a post-teenager, just a little bit past teen, probably early 20s, mid-20s, and he's a very good musician. He comes into our store. He likes to play the piano. We have some pianos in our store. We have some electric pianos and some regular pianos. He comes in, and he'll sit down and he'll play the piano. He's pretty good at it. He plays the same style all the time, which is no problem. You get a little tired of it after 3 hours, but he'll sit in there and he'll play for an hour, 2, 3 hours sometimes, and he's decent at it. But then one day I started talking with him, and we started finding out a little bit about him. He lives out on the streets, and the reason he lives out on the streets is because of his own life choices. He has a family here in Port Orchard. He's had a problem with substance abuse. He's a drug addict. His parents have told him he can't live in their house as long as he does drugs. So he chooses to go out on the street because he doesn't want to have to deal with what he's got to do if he's got to give up his drugs. Well, we had a friend in the store when I was talking with him and when I was talking with this young man, and the friend just decided one day when this guy said he didn't have a place to go, it was a cold night, so he took him over to Bremerton to the Salvation Army, and he was able to talk to him on the way over there, and on the trip that he was going over there, he was able to lead this young man to the Lord. So it was a really awesome thing. Now this young guy has come back into the store a couple of times since then. He's not terribly communicative, and I think he's been back onto the drugs again, because he's not been able to talk to me, converse with me much about anything. Another area of prayer that we need. We've got one right now outside the store that's been out there a couple of times in the last couple of days as well, that's seemingly somewhat well-to-do the way he's dressed, but he sits on the sidewalk and sleeps in a sleeping bag. We found out that he has a mental issue. He's got some kind of mental damage, brain damage. I don't know what from. His parents are from Gig Harbor, and his parents will come and pick him up if you tell them where he is. We talked to him, and he gave me his mom's number. So we were able to call his mom. His mom came and picked him up. 3 days later, he was back. Because what happens is he goes home, and because of his mental condition, he walks away from home and doesn't tell anybody, and he just disappears from his parents, and they don't know where he goes. He's in his mid-30s, so he's not like a young kid. But this is one of the things that we have to deal with. We've been able to talk with him a little bit. He's an interesting character that we have to minister to, we have to deal with. These are the kind of things that we go through. One other story I'd like to tell you, and that's another guy that we've known for about 6 years. He came into the store in the first couple of months that we were there, and he had just been diagnosed with cancer when we first met him. Just been diagnosed with it. He's an elderly guy. He's in his 70s. Probably was in his late 60s at that time. But he talked to us many times. He claims to be a believer. He's a very nice guy. No mental problems, no drug problems, none of that kind of stuff. But the cancer has taken hold of him, and he's got some big issues. And I mentioned a few minutes ago, one of the questions I asked you, have you ever known anybody who said they were hopeless? Well, this guy has told me he doesn't know why God is doing this to him. Why is God doing this to me? I'm not a druggie. I'm not this. I'm not that. I've got cancer. It's killing me. I've lost my apartment now. They've evicted me from my apartment. I'm living in my car because I have no money, because I can't work, because my body doesn't let me. Why is God doing this to me? That's on us to say, how can we answer this? Lord, help us answer this guy. Well, what answer do we have? And we have to point him to God and what we can do. What he can do, sorry, not what we can do. Just yesterday, we also received a request from another organization here in the United States who said they're working with orphaned children in the Israeli area right now in Israel, where the parents of children are being killed in the war that's going on between Hamas or the other people that are having, the different groups that are lobbing rockets and stuff into Israel are killing off people, and some of those people have children. And sometimes those children are becoming orphans. And they found us online, and they sent us a letter yesterday, and they're asking us for some support for them. We don't have any financial support we can give them, but we do have prayer support, and we've indicated that back to them. I already mentioned our internship program with Coffee Oasis. That's ongoing, so that's another ministry opportunity. We've been able to share the gospel with every single one of the interns that we've had, and we've had 9 interns at this point over the years that we've been there. They have 100 hours in the store is the internship that they give, so we get 100 hours with each kid, with each person. Some of them are not kids, but some of them are. So that's one. And then we also are able to minister to our volunteers, and we have quite a few volunteers that we've had through the years, and some of them are Christians. Some of them are not. And so we are able to have a level of relationship with them that allows us to share the gospel with them, even if they're not saved people. Also, there's one other area of our ministry opportunities, and that is that we have adoption grants. We've just completed an adoption grant cycle. What that means is we've just gone through an application process for a whole bunch of applicants, and our board has chosen the recipient of a grant for the end of this year, and we're sending out a grant for this year for somebody to help out with their adoption expenses, which is our primary purpose. Incidentally, we are required to do that at least once a year by the IRS. We actually have to pass out one at least once a year. This is actually our second this year, but that's okay. The ministry needs. So the ministry needs are the answer to a question that we're supposed to ask. When we went through missionary training, they told us one of the questions you're supposed to ask is, how can you, all of you, help out or be partners or be involved with our ministry? And so that comes from several different things here. There's several different ways that people can get involved. Anyone can get involved. You could get involved, working, helping, supporting in some way. The first and most obvious one, and honestly the most important one, is prayer. We need your prayers. We need your prayers. We need your prayers. We need to have God's assistance, God's work in what we're doing. If we're doing what he wants, he's going to help us. If we step outside of what he wants, we're going to be fighting for what we're trying to do. Even if we have the best intentions, we're still going to be fighting for what we're trying to do if we're not doing what he wants. So prayer is the most important one. We need prayer warriors to lift up our family and our ministry. And I say our family because we have family issues that come up because of the store. I spend about between 60 and 70 hours a week at the store. Bethany spends probably 20 to 30, and each of the kids is probably there 20 to 30, depending, because we rotate through and everybody gets a chance to be there. But that means that they're not at home, they're not doing school, or if they're doing school, they're doing it completely on their own, because I don't have much time to help them at the store. If they come to the store, they're completely on their own. If they stay home, everything's fine. Bethany can take care of the school and stuff there, but if they come to the store, I'm working with the customers. I don't have time to be doing school. So school's struggling for some of the younger kids, especially. Sometimes it's just other things like we didn't get the clothes clean, so their clothes are not clean for today, so we got to get back home and do the clothes between 10 o'clock and midnight, that kind of thing. So we need prayer for the family. The second thing you can do would be just simply drop by the store and encourage us. You just drop by and say hi. Some just come by and say hi and say, hey, nice to see you guys are working here. It's good to see you. Third thing is related to that, if you're so inclined. Our store is set up in such a way that the finances from the store go into the grant program. So any profits from the store go to the grant program so that people can have the grant for their children, for their adoption of children. So if you shop at the store, that money is used to support that grant program. Okay? Now, granted, it's also used to support the store because we have to keep the store open. So the store's business plan shows the store taking track of itself first, paying its overhead, and as soon as it gets to the overhead level, 100% of the remainder goes into the program. You could donate merchandise to the store. If you have anything to donate, that's one way that anybody could help. We have a lot of that go on. We take donations on Saturdays only, but we do take donations. You can give financially. You can partner financially with anybody can do that. You can just come in and do it at the store. You can do it by calling us. You could become a partner through In Faith, and that's what we're set up for now, is we're finally set up so we can do that through In Faith. So you can do monthly, or you can do one time or anything like that financially. You can volunteer in the store. We have, like I said, we have a bunch of volunteers, and those volunteers do all sorts of stuff like sorting inventory, cleaning, distributing, inventory around the store, organization, facing, if you understand what that is, making things look pretty, as well as more complex things that we could use help with. Like I'm trying to install a sound system in the store that was donated to the store, but I haven't been able to put it up, so it's still sitting in a box, actually 3 boxes. You could help to manage the front counter if you're so inclined. Some people like to be out front helping with other things. If that's you and you want to help out, that's a good way you could do it. One point on that is we do have a difficulty managing the front counter because our major focus in our store is that top block in the pyramid. And that top block in the pyramid is the person going to know Jesus Christ? So the person who's out in the front counter is the face of the store. So the face of the store has to be someone who knows Jesus as their Savior and is willing to share it with others. So we can't pick somebody up who says, "Oh, I'm willing to help you," and then find out they're not saved or they're not interested in sharing the gospel with anybody. Which we have one lady who's offered several times to help us out, but she's not a Christian, and I can't have her in the front of the store. So I have to be careful of those kind of things. Just something to think about. And you can also, the last way I have that written down here is you can also tell other people about our ministry. Tell them about our store and our ministry and let them know that we exist and that we're out there to help people. I got about 7 minutes to go, so I'm going to change gears now. And I'm going to talk about what God says about adoption. So this is why the store exists. This is why we have 4 adopted children, okay? If you'd like to, you can turn in your Bibles to Galatians chapter 4. And this is a really good passage because it melds the message of adoption with the message of Christmas. So if you can turn to that if you want to, otherwise I'll just read it here. Galatians chapter 4 will begin at verse 3. Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of the time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive the adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying out, Abba, Father. Therefore, you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir of God through Christ. And I'm going to read Romans 8:15 also because it fits right into the same thing. And it fits into what we're discussing tonight. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. There's definitely a connection in between those two verses. None of us are ever physically born into God's family. We're not physically born into his family in any way. We're not spiritually born into God's family when we're born physically. None of us are Christians when we're born. I think we all know that. We're born as slaves to sin, and that's what these verses are telling us. We're born as slaves to our human nature. And as such, we cannot receive any of God's inheritance, the inheritance that he has promised to all of his children. But if we're not his children, we can't receive that inheritance. I'm going to tell you a little story real quick here. When we adopted our first two children, the first two children we adopted, which are Nora and Arian, they're sitting back there. I don't have dum-dums for them either, sorry. We went through the adoption process in China. And I was at the, it's interesting, I was at the United States Embassy, United States Consulate in Guangzhou, China. And it was on July 4th, 2016, which is when they became U.S. citizens. And in our adoption and U.S. citizen swear-in, one of the things that they require you to do is if you're adopting this child, they are to be a child with the same rights, responsibilities, and entitlements. And I can't remember the wording exactly. It was something like that. Rights, responsibilities, and entitlements of any other child, biological or otherwise, that is part of your family. So if they are part of our family, they are 100% part of that. And they made us swear to that, okay? So now I'm looking at the Bible and I'm saying, God says that the inheritance that he gives us is reserved for those who are his children. And I'm thinking, I had to swear to this, that all these kids that I'm adopting, were going to be 100% entitled to every single bit of inheritance, just as if they'd been born to my wife and I. And it's a really cool idea to think of, that God set it up so that his family is adopted. And when we adopt children, we get the same picture of adoption. And then we see this entitlement, where the entitlement is for every single thing that is in this family is now part of them. They get the rights and responsibilities to every single thing that's there. And then we look over here at God and we say, and when we become part of his family, we are entitled the rights and responsibilities of everything that he has promised to his children. So as we become part of his family, we get that. There's no denying it is central to the gospel message. That the adoption picture is a perfect picture of what God does for us. I'm going to take a couple more minutes, even though I'm running a little bit late, and I knew I would, because I told Max or somebody I'd said 30 minutes, and I always go over whatever I say, and I did practiced. It was 31 minutes when I practiced. That means it'll be 40 when I do it. Okay, so I've got some examples of adoption in the Bible that I'd like to read for you guys, or lead you to. Sorry. Anybody know what the first recorded adoption in the Bible was? Anybody want to tell me the first recorded adoption in the Bible? Okay, the first one I could find, and the first one when I was reading, the first one everybody said, is Moses. Okay, Moses in Exodus chapter 2 was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. And we all know the story, how Moses was born to an Israelite woman after Pharaoh had decreed that all the Jewish babies, Hebrew babies, would be killed. And she hid him in a basket, put him in the river in the Nile, and she left her daughter there with him. The basket floated to Pharaoh's daughter, who picked up the baby. fell in love with the baby, and then she got to the Moses' sister was able to go and say, hey, you want somebody to nurse him? And his own mother was able to nurse him. But if you read Exodus chapter 2, verse 10 says, when the child grew older, she, being Moses' birth mother, brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, Pharaoh's daughter's son. He became her son, and she named him Moses because she said, I drew him out of water. So he became Pharaoh's daughter's son. So that's the first known adoption. So that's one of those adoptions that is recorded for us in history in the Bible, and it's an incredible adoption. It's an incredible story, and it had an incredible ending, which is all of the impact that Moses had because of his position as an adopted child of Pharaoh's daughter. He had rights and responsibilities that go along with that put him in a position of power, so he was able to help the Hebrew people in their escape. There's some others here that I'm going to go to. Some of them don't say that they're adopted, that they didn't necessarily become a son of, but you got to remember that the legal adoption term that we use in America is not the way that most adoptions happened in the past in history, and also not in a lot of countries still, where there isn't necessarily a legal certificate, license, whatever you want to put it as. So sometimes adoptions are just somebody lives with them and they just become part of your family. One of those pictures is Eli and Samuel. Hannah, Samuel's mother, had been barren, was looking for a child. God promised her a child. She had Samuel as a child, but she promised that if she got a child, she would give the child up to God to serve him. She did. She gave him to Eli to raise, and Eli essentially raised Samuel. Okay, so that's the second one. Samuel, another big impact. He's a guy who became a prophet, was able to do a lot of things. He's the guy who anointed David, the king of Israel. And there's all sorts of wonderful things that he did. So an adopted child in that position. Mordecai and Esther, another one. We don't know a whole lot about Esther. There's not a whole lot in the Bible about her background. We do know that she didn't live with her parents. She lived with Mordecai, who was her cousin, her older cousin. We know that he had a lot of influence in her life, and we know that she had an amazing influence in the Hebrews, in the Hebrew world, because of what she was. She was an adopted child. And then we'll get to Joseph and Jesus. Jesus himself was not Joseph's birth child. He was an adopted child. So we're getting into the Christmas story now. Jesus, being an adopted child, had the biggest impact anyone has ever had on the history of the planet. Okay? So as an adopted child, and that's not why he had that impact, and I'm not trying to say that, but he had that impact of being the most impactful person on the planet in the history of mankind. One more adoption, the most important adoption, and that is God and us. We looked at Romans 8:15, we looked at Galatians 4. We saw that we're born into sin as slaves to our flesh, and we know that everyone on earth is separated from God. So everyone is born not in God's family. But because of the great love God had for us, He's made us alive together with Christ if we've chosen to be in His family. He's adopted us into His family and given us all of the rights and responsibilities and all of the inheritance that He has promised for His children. Even in the Old Testament, God used willing men and women to raise up children that would change the course of history for His glory through adoption. He's still doing this today through adoptive parents around the world. And that's the application of the pyramid of purpose that I mentioned earlier. Every single thing that's in here, every single thing that we do in our ministry is aimed at that one top block of the pyramid. Will this person have a chance to choose Jesus Christ from what we're doing in this ministry? We want orphan children to be able to be a part of a family. We want them to be loved and cherished by parents. We want them to be loved as sons and daughters and to have the rights and responsibilities of sons and daughters. But even more than that, we want them to have the chance to be sons and daughters of the Creator, of God Himself. And we want them the chance to have the rights and responsibilities and the inheritance of what God gives them. If you'd like more information on what we're doing, please feel free to ask us, Bethany or I, and if you're really interested, you can corner one of the kids and see if they'll answer any of the questions too, okay? So I won't stop you from that. Let's go ahead and pray. Thanks. Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for tonight. Thank you that we could be here. I just pray that you'd be with us as we go our ways tonight, and I thank you for the adoption that you've given us into your world, into your family, and I pray that you'd help us as we live our lives for you, that we would be able to be impactful in the ways that you want us to be in our life. In Jesus'